Girl sees millionaire being thrown into a grinder, then she does this. Let me know what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and tell me what city you're watching from. I'd love to know if you enjoyed my story and get to know you better, so please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The scorching midday sun punished the dusty streets of Redstone when Lily felt her stomach rumble once more. Her bare feet, marked by the rust-colored dust that stained the entire industrial town, carried her from dumpster to dumpster behind the central market. At only 4 years old, the little girl already knew the routine of survival. Wake before dawn, search for scraps of food before other homeless people got there first, and always stay alert to the dangers that surrounded children on their own. On that March day, while rummaging through a trash can behind Mr. Henderson's bakery, Lily heard something that made her blood run cold. Desperate screams echoed from the Thompson family's junkyard, which was just a few yards from where she was. The voice was that of an adult man, filled with terror and pleading. Lily knew those sounds well. She had witnessed fights and violence on the streets before, but something in those screams made her stop and pay attention. Curious and worried, the girl approached the fence that separated the vacant lot from the junkyard. Through a gap between the old wooden planks, she could see a scene that would be seared into her memory forever. A gray-haired man, wearing a suit despite the intense heat, was being dragged by Walter Thompson toward the industrial shredder that processed scrap metal. The machine ran at a constant rhythm, its iron teeth chewing through chunks of metal with a deafening noise. The man in the suit fought to break free, but Walter, known in town for his brute strength and violent temper, easily overpowered him. Lily recognized the junkyard owner by the scars on his face and the aggressive way he always treated children who came near his property. She knew she should run, hide, pretend she hadn't seen anything. That was how it worked on the streets. Those who saw too much didn't last long. But something inside her wouldn't let her just flee. Maybe it was the memory of her mother, Catherine, who always told her to help those in danger, even when they had nothing themselves. Or maybe it was the expression of absolute panic on the suited man's face, an expression she knew well, the same one she saw in the mirror when she had nightmares about the day her mother disappeared without a word. Without a second thought, Lily bent down and filled her small hands with handfuls of the red dust that covered the ground. With all the strength her little arms could muster, she threw the dirt through the gap in the fence, aiming directly at Walter's eyes. The man screamed in surprise and pain, letting go of his victim to wipe his face. "Mister, come with me," Lily shouted, her childish voice cutting through the air like a siren. The man in the suit looked in the direction of the voice, confused and disoriented, but something in the girl's urgent tone made him react. He ran toward the fence, while Walter still struggled with the dirt burning his eyes. Lily grabbed the stranger's hand through the opening and pulled him with all her might. "This way, mister, quick!" Together, they ran through the narrow alleys that the girl knew like the back of her hand. Behind them, they could hear Walter's furious shouts and the sound of his heavy footsteps in pursuit. Lily guided the man through a labyrinth of alleys, hills, and descents that only someone who lived on the streets would know. She led him to an abandoned building where she used to hide when life became too dangerous. There, they both took refuge, panting and in shock. "Thank you, my child," the man said, his voice still trembling. "You saved my life. What's your name?" "Lily," the girl replied, studying the stranger's face. He had kind eyes despite the fear he still carried, and his expensive clothes contrasted sharply with the surroundings. "Are you important?" Arthur Blackwood, a 62-year-old businessman and owner of one of Redstone's largest construction companies, smiled for the first time that terrible day. "My name is Arthur, and yes, some people think I'm important, but today you are the most important person in the world to me." Over the next few hours, as they waited to be sure Walter had given up looking for them, Lily and Arthur talked. She told him about her life on the streets, about how her mother had disappeared 6 months ago, leaving her completely alone. He spoke about his company, about how he had built an empire from scratch, but avoided mentioning why Walter had tried to kill him. What Arthur didn't tell the girl at that moment was that Walter Thompson wasn't just the owner of a junkyard. He was also the stepfather of Isabella, the woman Arthur had married a year ago, believing he had found love again after the loss of his wife, Beatrice. Isabella, 28, had come into his life like a hurricane of beauty and charm, winning not only his heart, but also enough of his trust to become his primary heir. The attack that day had not been random. Arthur was beginning to suspect that his new wife was not who she claimed to be, and that Walter's junkyard was just the tip of the iceberg of a much more complex and dangerous plot. But these suspicions were still just shadows in his mind, fears he hoped were unfounded. As the sun began to set over the hills surrounding Redstone, Arthur decided it was safe to leave their hiding place. Before they parted, he took a generous amount of cash from his wallet and offered it to Lily. The girl stared at the bills with wide eyes. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. "I can't take this, Mr. Arthur," she said, gently pushing his hand back. "My mom always said helping people is free." That night, Arthur arrived home with a strange feeling in his chest. For the first time in months, he didn't feel completely alone in the world. A 4-year-old girl had risked her own safety to save him, expecting nothing in return. Meanwhile, his own wife. He shook his head, trying to push away the dark thoughts. Isabella was in the living room when he walked in, beautiful as always, but her eyes showed a concern that seemed strangely performative. "Where have you been, my love? I was worried." Arthur studied his wife's face, searching for signs of guilt or knowledge of what had happened. But Isabella was an excellent actress. "I had some trouble with suppliers," he lied, deciding to keep the attack a secret until he understood the situation better. Nothing to worry about. That night, as Isabella slept beside him, Arthur lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind kept returning to the girl who had saved him. There was something about her that touched him deeply, something beyond the obvious gratitude. Maybe it was the courage she had shown, or the purity in her actions, but Arthur felt that this encounter would change his life in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. On the other side of town, Lily slept in a sheltered corner under an awning, dreaming of the kind man she had met. In her childish dreams, he returned to take her away from the harsh life on the streets, to a place where she would never be hungry or afraid again. She didn't know that this dream was closer to reality than she imagined, nor that the dangers surrounding them were only just beginning to unfold. The days following the attack at the junkyard brought a restlessness that Arthur couldn't shake. While pretending everything was normal in front of Isabella, his mind worked tirelessly to decipher the motives behind the attempted murder. During meetings in his office, he would find himself looking out the window toward the town center, thinking of the brave little girl who had saved his life. Lily, for her part, couldn't get the encounter with the kind man in the suit out of her head. For the first time in months, she had felt something she thought she had lost forever, the feeling that someone cared about her. On that Thursday morning, she decided to do something she had never done before, actively look for Arthur. The girl knew the streets of Redstone well and knew where the important buildings in the city were. The Blackwood construction building stood out on the main avenue, its glass walls reflecting the blue Pennsylvania sky. Lily positioned herself across the street, watching the movement of people entering and leaving the elegant building. That's how she saw him for the first time since the incident. Arthur was getting out of a black car, wearing another impeccable suit, but his eyes carried a sadness she immediately recognized. It was the same expression she saw in her own reflection when she thought of her missing mother. "Mr. Arthur," she shouted, running through the traffic without a care for the cars. Arthur turned, surprised, and a genuine smile lit up his face when he recognized the girl. "Lily, you gave me a scare," he said, crouching down to her level. "How did you find me here?" "I looked for you." "Lil," she answered simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I wanted to see if you were okay." At that moment, something broke inside Arthur's chest. How long had it been since someone had genuinely worried about him? Isabella asked about his day, but always seemed to be thinking of other things. His employees treated him with respect, but it was respect based on fear and self-interest. Lily was different. Her concern was pure, without ulterior motives. "Want to have lunch with me?" he asked impulsively. "I know a place that makes the best cinnamon rolls in town." During lunch at the simple diner, Arthur purposely chose so as not to intimidate the girl. She shared more details about her life. Catherine, her mother, had worked as a cleaner in several houses in the city until she disappeared one night without explanation. Lily had been left alone in the small room they rented in the back of Mrs. Gable's house, but without money to pay, she was evicted a week later. "My mom always said she would come back," Lily murmured, playing with the cinnamon roll on her plate. "She said she had to take care of something important, but didn't explain what." Arthur felt a lump in his throat. The girl's story of abandonment touched old wounds in his own soul. He had also lost important people, first his parents in an accident when he was young, then his wife Beatrice 5 years ago, a victim of a degenerative disease that slowly took her from him. "Maybe she had problems she couldn't share with you," he suggested gently. "Sometimes adults make difficult choices to protect the ones they love." That afternoon, Arthur made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He took Lily to his house, an elegant mansion on the outskirts of Redstone, and asked Mrs. Davis, his housekeeper, to prepare a bath and clean clothes for the girl. When Isabella arrived from the beauty salon and found a dirty child playing in the living room, her reaction was immediate and revealing. "Arthur, what is this?" she asked, her voice laced with poorly concealed disdain. "Why did you bring this child into our home?" The way Isabella spoke about Lily, as if she were an unwanted object, made something click in Arthur's mind. For the first time, he saw his wife without the filters of love and trust, and he didn't like what he found. "This is Lily," he said calmly. "She helped me with a problem yesterday, and I thought I'd return the favor." "You can't just bring beggars into our house," Isabella retorted, momentarily forgetting to maintain the sweet facade she always showed her husband. "What will the neighbors think?" Lily, who was watching the argument with her big eyes, approached Arthur and touched his hand. "Mister, if I'm causing trouble, I can go," she said with a maturity that was startling for a 4-year-old. "You're not going anywhere," Arthur replied firmly, looking directly at Isabella. "This is my house too, and who I invite inside is my decision." The tension in the air was palpable. Isabella realized she had shown too much of her true personality and quickly tried to compose herself. "I'm sorry, love. It's just that I worry about your safety. You never know the story of these people from the streets." Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep in the guest room and Isabella had retreated to the bathroom, Arthur decided to make some calls he had been putting off. The first was to Jack Miller, a private investigator who had worked for him in the past, investigating dishonest competitors. "Jack, I need you to investigate some people for me," Arthur said in a low voice, discreetly. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood, what's it about?" "I want to know everything about Walter Thompson, owner of the junkyard in the industrial zone, and also..." He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I want you to do a full investigation on my wife, Isabella." On the other end of the line, Jack paused. "Your wife, sir? May I ask why?" "I'd rather not go into detail right now. Just tell me, is it possible to investigate someone without them knowing?" Perfectly possible. I'll start tomorrow. As Arthur made his investigative plans, he didn't know he was being watched. Isabella, far from being in the bathroom as she had said, was listening to the conversation from the hallway. Her eyes, which moments before had shown only irritation, now shone with something far more dangerous, controlled panic. That same night, after she was sure Arthur was asleep, Isabella slipped quietly out of the house and drove to a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town. There, at a back table, she met with Walter Thompson. The man had a bandage over one eye, a result of the dirt Lily had thrown at him. "You failed," Isabella said without preamble, "and now he's suspicious." "That little pest got in my way," Walter growled. If it weren't for her, if it weren't for a 4-year-old child, you would have already solved our problem," Isabella interrupted coldly. "And now he's brought the girl home. That can't be a coincidence." Walter took a swig of whiskey before answering. "Maybe it's time to solve 2 problems at once." "No," Isabella said quickly. "Nothing can happen to the child while she's in the house. That would raise too many suspicions. We need to be smarter." What neither of them knew was that Lily had woken up in the middle of the night and noticed Isabella's absence. Curious and worried for Arthur, the girl had quietly followed the woman's car, using the survival skills she'd learned on the streets. Hidden behind a pile of crates outside the bar, she managed to hear fragments of the conversation that confirmed her worst fears. When Isabella returned home, Lily was already back in the guest room, pretending to be asleep. But her small mind was working furiously, trying to process what she had discovered. The man who had tried to hurt Arthur was no stranger. He knew Isabella, and together they were planning something terrible. The next morning, Lily woke up determined to protect the man who had shown her so much kindness. During breakfast, she watched Isabella's every move, every glance, every word. The woman was beautiful and polite, but there was something in her eyes that reminded Lily of the dangerous men she had learned to avoid on the streets. "Mr. Arthur," she said when they were alone in his home office, "can I tell you something important?" "Of course, my dear, what is it?" Lily hesitated. How could she explain to an adult that his wife was dangerous? How could she make him believe her without sounding like a child with a wild imagination? "The pretty lady doesn't like me," she said finally. Arthur knelt in front of her, his gentle hands holding the girl's small shoulders. "Why do you think that?" "Because her eyes get different when she looks at me, like the eyes of the bad man you know." A chill ran down Arthur's spine. Lily was just a child, but there was something in the way she observed people, an intuition developed from the need to survive on the streets, that made her extraordinarily perceptive. "Lily," he said carefully, "have you ever seen the pretty lady talking to the bad man?" The girl nodded slowly, her large eyes fixed on Arthur's face. And in that moment, they both knew that their lives were in far greater danger than they had imagined. Lily's revelation about Isabella and Walter put Arthur on constant alert. For the next 2 weeks, he feigned normalcy while awaiting the report from the detective, Jack Miller. Every morning, he watched his wife with different eyes, noticing details that had previously gone unnoticed. How she always left the house on Tuesdays and Thursdays with no clear explanation. How she received phone calls that left her tense. How her eyes hardened when she thought no one was looking. Lily adapted surprisingly well to life in the mansion, but her constant presence clearly irritated Isabella. The girl had developed a habit of following Arthur around the house like a small, silent bodyguard, and this disturbed the woman in ways she struggled to disguise. "Arthur, darling," Isabella said one morning as they had breakfast in the garden, "don't you think it would be better to find a suitable family for the girl, or maybe an orphanage? She would be better off with children her own age." Lily, who was playing with a doll Arthur had bought for her, looked up quickly. She had learned to recognize when adults were talking about her future without including her in the conversation. "Lily is fine here," Arthur replied firmly, "and she's not a problem for anyone." "It's not a matter of being a problem," Isabella insisted, forcing a smile. "It's just that a child needs stability, a real mother. I don't have experience with children." At that moment, Arthur's phone rang. It was Jack Miller with news that would change everything. "Mr. Blackwood, I need to speak with you urgently, not over the phone. Can I come to your house?" "Better to meet at the office," Arthur replied, looking meaningfully at Isabella. 1 o'clock. At the construction company's office, Jack opened a folder full of documents and photographs with a grave expression. "Mr. Blackwood, what I've discovered will shock you. Your wife is not who she says she is." Arthur felt the world spin around him. "What do you mean? Isabella Thompson doesn't exist. Her real name is Carmela Torres, a daughter of Sebastian Torres, your former partner who passed away 15 years ago." The memories came back like an avalanche. Sebastian Torres had been his partner in the early years of the construction company. A hard-working man, but one who didn't understand business like Arthur did. When the company began to grow, Arthur made some questionable legal maneuvers that resulted in Sebastian losing his stake in the company. The man died a few years later, bitter and in financial trouble, leaving behind a young daughter. "Carmela was about 12 when her father died," Jack continued. "She was raised by her uncle, Walter Thompson. And sir, there's more. She studied theater in the city, specializing in performance. That explains how she managed to deceive you for so long." "But why wait so long to get revenge?" Arthur asked, still trying to process the information. "Because she was putting together a very elaborate plan. I found out that over the last 5 years, she's used different identities to get close to businessmen and politicians in the region, always with the same goal: to accumulate information and money to destroy those she holds responsible for her family's ruin." Jack showed photographs of Carmela with different appearances and names, forged documents, bank accounts in various banks. It was a sophisticated operation of revenge and illicit enrichment. "And there's something more disturbing," the detective said, pulling another document from the folder. "I found records that she investigated your personal life before approaching you. She knows about Mrs. Beatrice's illness, about how you suffered with the loss. She used that information to manipulate your feelings." Arthur felt sick. Beatrice had died from a rare degenerative disease that affected her vision and nervous system. The last years of her life were marked by pain and progressive dependency, and Arthur had blamed himself for not being able to save her. Carmela had used this emotional vulnerability to win his trust. "There's more," Jack continued. "I found out that Catherine, Lily's mother, didn't disappear of her own free will. She was threatened." "Threatened by whom?" "By Carmela and Walter. Catherine worked as a cleaner at the Harrison's house, a family that had information about your business. They forced her to steal important documents. When she refused to help anymore, they threatened to kill her. She fled to protect her daughter." The revelation hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. Lily had lost her mother because of the revenge directed at him. The girl had saved his life, but she was a victim of the same plot aimed at destroying him. "Where is Catherine now?" he asked, desperate. "She's hiding in a small town, working under a false name. But sir, there's something you need to know urgently. Carmela has found out you're investigating her." "How?" "I'm not sure, but she has accelerated her plans. I discovered that she and Walter are planning one last strike before disappearing. And this time they intend to eliminate all the evidence, including witnesses." Arthur immediately thought of Lily. The girl had witnessed the attack at the junkyard and now lived in his house. To Carmela, she represented an unacceptable risk. That afternoon, when Arthur arrived home, He found the mansion strangely silent. Mrs. Davis, the housekeeper, was in the kitchen with a worried expression. "Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Isabella left early and took Lily with her," she said. "She said they were going for a walk in the park, but that was 4 hours ago, and the girl didn't want to go." Arthur's blood ran cold. He ran to the room where Lily slept and found signs of a struggle. A broken vase, the doll he had given her thrown on the floor, and a small spot of blood on the carpet. His phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello, darling," said Carmela's sweet voice, but now laced with a coldness he had never noticed before. "I imagine you've already discovered my true identity." "Where is Lily?" Arthur shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "The little pest is safe, for now, but that depends on you. I want 15 million in cash and the construction company transferred to my name. You have until noon tomorrow." "You're crazy if you think I'm going to—" "Oh, you will," she interrupted. "Because if you don't do exactly as I say, the girl will find out how painful it is to disappoint Uncle Walter. And you know how he loves to use those machines at the junkyard." The call was cut, leaving Arthur alone with his desperation and guilt. Lily had saved his life, and now she was paying the price for his past. But he didn't know that, at that very moment, in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Redstone, a 4-year-old girl was about to show once again that she had more courage than many adults. Tied to an old chair, Lily watched Walter and Carmela argue about the next steps of their plan. She had pretended to be more hurt than she actually was, and her captors had relaxed their guard. Slowly, using a technique she had learned on the streets to get out of dangerous situations, she began to work on the ropes binding her wrists. "The old man is going to pay," Walter was saying, sharpening a knife, "and then we disappear with the money." "Don't be rash," Carmela replied. "First the money, then we settle the scores." Lily continued to work on the ropes, her small but clever mind formulating a plan. She had promised herself she would protect Arthur, just as he had taken care of her. And a promise, as her mother always said, was sacred. Outside the warehouse, unknown to anyone, a figure watched through a broken window. Catherine had returned to Redstone when she heard her daughter was in danger, and now she faced the biggest dilemma of her life. Risk everything to save Lily, or remain hidden so as not to become another victim of Carmela's revenge. The morning of the deadline arrived with a grey sky that mirrored the despair in Arthur's heart. He had spent the entire night organizing the money demanded by Carmela, selling stocks and liquidating investments with a speed that caught the attention of even his bankers. But his plan wasn't simply to hand over the money. He had contacted Jack Miller to set up a rescue operation. In the abandoned warehouse, Lily had managed to free herself from the ropes during the night. With the silent skill she had developed living on the streets, she explored the place looking for a way out. That's when she found something that would change everything. A box of old documents hidden behind some rusted machinery. Among the dusty papers were birth certificates, contracts and photographs that told a very different story from the one she knew. One of the photographs showed a young woman holding a baby, and on the back was written, "Beatrice and our daughter, 1995. Lily recognized the woman's face from other photos she had seen at Arthur's house. Beatrice had been his first wife, but according to the documents, she had a daughter before meeting him. A daughter who had been given up for adoption and whose registered name was Carmela Torres. The terrifying discovery was completed when Lily found a second document, her own original birth certificate, which stated that Catherine had worked as Beatrice's private nurse in the last years of her life. The document revealed something even more shocking. Lily had a specific birthmark described in the medical record, the same mark that Beatrice had because Catherine had become pregnant by Daniel Carter, a man who had worked as Arthur's personal driver years ago. The papers told the full story. Daniel had been fired 5 years earlier for alleged theft, but in truth, he had discovered that Carmela was infiltrating Arthur's life. When he tried to warn his boss, he was framed by Carmela herself, who planted false evidence. Desperate and unable to prove his innocence, Daniel had left Redstone. Catherine, pregnant and alone, continued to work to support her daughter until Carmela threatened her to get information about Arthur's routines. In that moment, Lily understood that she wasn't just a girl who had saved Arthur by chance. She was the granddaughter of the woman he had loved more than anything in the world. Beatrice, who died without knowing she had a granddaughter, had left an emotional legacy that manifested in Lily's courage and kindness. Outside the warehouse, Catherine gathered her courage to act. She had watched the movement during the night and realized that Walter had left, leaving only Carmela guarding Lily. It was her chance to get her daughter back without violence. Using a key she had stolen years ago when she worked in that same warehouse as a cleaner, she entered silently. "Mommy!" Lily whispered upon seeing Catherine running into her arms. "My baby, are you okay?" Catherine asked, checking if Lily was hurt. "We have to get out of here now." But before they could escape, Carmela appeared at the warehouse entrance, blocking the exit. Her eyes shone with a fury that had been building for 15 years of planning. "The family reunited," she said sarcastically. "How touching. But you're not going anywhere until Arthur pays for what he did to my father." "Carmela," Catherine said bravely, "I know who you really are. I know you're Beatrice's daughter." Carmela's face contorted. "Beatrice abandoned me when I was a baby. Gave me up for adoption because she didn't have the courage to acknowledge a child out of wedlock. Then she married Arthur and was happy while I grew up in poverty with my adoptive father." "Your mother never knew Sebastian was your adoptive father," Catherine revealed. "She looked for you for years. In the last months of her life when I was taking care of her, all she talked about was finding the daughter she had to give away." The revelation hit Carmela like a slap. Her entire revenge had been based on an incomplete understanding of the facts. Beatrice hadn't abandoned her daughter out of a lack of love, but because it was impossible to raise her alone in the 1980s when single mothers faced extreme prejudice. In that moment of Carmela's emotional confusion, Arthur arrived at the warehouse accompanied by Jack Miller and 2 assistants. They had tracked the location through the signal of the phone Carmela used in the previous call. "We've reached an agreement, Carmela," Arthur said calmly, even as his heart pounded at the sight of Lily safe and sound. "But first, I want you to know a truth that will change everything." He approached slowly, showing he was not a threat. "Your father, Sebastian, didn't lose his stake in the company because of me. He voluntarily sold his shares to pay off gambling debts he had racked up. I have the original documents signed by him. I never told anyone this because I wanted to preserve his memory in your eyes." Carmela shook her head, refusing to believe it. "You're lying." "Jack, show her the documents," Arthur said. The detective opened a folder and displayed contracts with Sebastian's notarized signature, selling his shares to clear debts with loan sharks. There was also a handwritten letter where Sebastian explained that he had hidden his gambling addiction from his daughter so as not to destroy the image she had of him. "Your father asked me to never tell you the truth," Arthur continued. "He said he'd rather you thought he'd been betrayed than know he had gambled away the family's future. I respected his wish, but I carried the guilt for years, thinking I could have done more to help him." Carmela's legs gave out, and she sat heavily on the warehouse floor. 15 years of hatred and planning for revenge crumbled in a matter of minutes. She had destroyed innocent lives, including those of Catherine and Lily, based on a lie her own father had created to protect her. "And there's one more thing you need to know," Arthur said gently, kneeling beside her. "Beatrice left a letter for you, in case you were ever found. She never stopped loving you." Jack handed over a time-yellowed envelope. With trembling hands, Carmela opened it and read the words of love and longing that Beatrice had written in her final days. The letter explained the impossible circumstances that forced her to give her daughter up for adoption, the regret she carried her whole life, and the eternal love she felt for the girl she never got to raise. At that moment, Walter arrived at the warehouse expecting to find the situation under control, but instead found Carmela crying and Arthur, Catherine, and Lily free. Realizing the plan had failed, he tried to flee but was detained by Jack's assistance. In the following months, the lives of everyone involved were completely transformed. Carmela, confronted with the truth about her past, cooperated with the authorities and returned all the money she had illicitly obtained over the years. She was sentenced to community service and psychological therapy to deal with the trauma she had carried since childhood. Walter was imprisoned for attempted murder and extortion, but his sentence was reduced due to Carmela's cooperation in revealing other crimes they had committed together. Arthur, discovering that Lily was Beatrice's granddaughter, decided that fate had placed the girl in his life for a reason. With the emotional consent of Catherine, who recognized he could give her daughter a better future, he began the legal adoption process. "Are you sure about this?" Catherine asked at the court hearing, holding Lily's hands. "I am," Arthur replied, "and you will always be welcome in our home. Lily needs her mother as much as she needs an adoptive grandfather." Catherine had been reinstated as a family employee, now working as Arthur's personal administrator and living in a comfortable apartment he provided for her. Daniel Carter, Lily's real father, was located in another city and cleared of all false accusations. Arthur reinstated him with honors at work, promoting him to operations manager of the construction company. The reunion between Daniel and his daughter was emotional, and Lily finally had the chance to know the father she thought she had lost forever. A year later, on the porch of the renovated mansion, Arthur watched Lily play in the garden with other children he had begun to regularly host at his home, a social project he developed in partnership with Catherine to help vulnerable families. The girl had grown, but she kept the same courage and kindness that had made her save a stranger that day at the junkyard. "Grandpa Arthur," she said, running to hug him, "did Miss Carmela come to visit today?" Carmela had become a regular presence at the house, working to repair the damage she had caused and slowly building a relationship with the family she had discovered was hers by right. Therapy had helped her deal with her abandonment and anger, replacing them with a renewed purpose to do good. "She did," Arthur replied, stroking the girl's hair. "She brought you new books." On that golden afternoon in Redstone, as he watched Lily distribute the books to the other children, Arthur finally understood that some encounters are not coincidences. A brave little girl had saved his life that day at the junkyard, but in truth they had saved each other. She had given him a family again, and he had given her the security and love that every child deserves. The birthmark Lily shared with Beatrice wasn't just a genetic coincidence. It was proof that true love finds a way to persist through generations, connecting hearts that were destined to meet, even under the most unlikely circumstances. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10. And thank you so much.